going to focus on sports nutrition. Now, there may be other questions that some of you have with regard to Super Amino 23, and we may as well get to those categorical questions at the end of the call. But for the first part of the call, I'd like to introduce my friend, Dr. Grandi, who spent quite a bit of his time, quite a bit of his life actually, bringing this to the marketplace. So without further ado, I'd like to actually introduce Dr. Grandi. Dr. Grandi, are you there?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, Dr. Grandi. I'm going to let you take it away, and wherever you choose to pause, or if I have a question that might direct us or move us in another direction, I might interject, but please do begin wherever you would like.
Yes, let me tell to our audience that, of course, like you said before, no protein were equally created by Mother Nature, which means that they are very different. Just to do a long story short, still some textbooks use empirical values of the protein and nutritional value that were just calculated, on a desk. Nobody did ever clinical study to calculate those values. During the last 30 years, was discovered the way to do it, and we discovered the meter to measure those different proteins in a way that you can calculate exactly each protein how much nutritional value has for a human being. And therefore each animal is different. And as human being, we discover, of course, the real value of protein. To do a long story short explanation, because otherwise it will take too much time and I don't want to bother our audience, you have a group of protein. In the old textbook protein, the net nitrogen utilization, which means the percentage of utilization of our human body to synthesize new cells, was calculated close to 100%. That was, like I said before, a huge mistake, and was discovered later that protein, they range from an average minimum of 16% to a maximum average of 32%, which means that when you take, suppose, a pound of meat, and that pound of meat, let's say, that contains, X gram of protein, in reality we absorb almost the majority of those protein, but our body doesn't utilize those protein, which means those protein only are utilized in about 32%. The difference is lost. Now, for the first time when was discovered a Super Amino 23, the clinical study, they show the result in what is called nitrogen balance, which means the percentage of those protein that were used to synthesize new cells within our human body, and they show that was 99%, which means that was discovered within Mother Nature a protein that provides 99% net nitrogen utilization. Again, that means that the percentage of the protein that are used to synthesize new cells, new enzyme, new hormones, new cells bond, everything in our body, that with 99% against the maximum among dietary protein of 32%, and the lower minimum that is around 16%. Now, in addition to that characteristic, which is huge, because provide you, just to give you a real example, 6 times more protein synthesis than any product in the industry designed for sports nutrition. Any of those proteins that we consume for sport, which means soy, whey, casein. This Super Amino 23 provides 6 times more net nitrogen utilization, more protein synthesis, body protein synthesis than them, and in comparison with the meat, fish, poultry, eggs, an average of only 32% is used, which means that provides 3%. In addition to that characteristic, we have another characteristic that is also so important, that they provide that nourishment in less than 23 minutes. Now, all dietary protein, they have an average between 3 to 6 hours of digestion time, which means with the Super Amino 23, you nourish your human body in less than 23 minutes. With all dietary protein, you need from a minimum of 3 to 6 hour average, which means per minute you can nourish not only 6 times more than other dietary protein, but also in a fraction of the time, which means from up to 12 times less to be digested with the Super Amino. In addition to that, you have also another unique characteristic, that the toxins that are released by the digestion of protein, they are called nitrogen catabolites. They, in normal dietary protein, again, either meat, fish, or poultry, or dietary supplement, they can release between 68% average of toxic weight to 84% toxic weight. The amount of toxic weight released by Super Amino 23 is only 1%. If we just see those characteristics, we realize that can be digested in a fraction of time, release only 1% of toxic metabolic toxin in comparison to 68 to 84% release by dietary protein, and provide a body protein synthesis per time that goes, please pay attention because it's very important, from a minimum of 24 times more to a maximum of 96 times more in comparison to dietary protein, which means that it's really a unique protein. When we discover, like Dr. Fleischer said before, we didn't invent it. This is something that is composed by 8 different essential amino acids that they go to milligrams. In statistical data, you have more than 200 million different compositions that you can have, which means no human mind could have designed Super Amino 23. Why? Because you don't have time in a lifetime to calculate over 200 million different formula. Each formula needs clinical study of 6 months performed in human being, which means that was impossible. We just found in Mother Nature, we spent 7 years, and after those 7 years of clinical study, the clinical study result showed that Mother Nature, of course, was right. And we start using the product just for clinical nutrition. It's still used for clinical nutrition. And among so many different utilization in clinical nutrition, is used for the treatment and prevention of malnutrition in newborn and babies and children, which means that it's a very safe product. And that is just to show you that this is not another product. Fortunately for all of us, and because Mother Nature did, is the best product that can be found worldwide. As a matter of fact, clinical studies have shown that it's the only product that can substitute 100% dietary protein. They can use Super Amino 23 in substitution of dietary protein for any number of years, no limits. Now, Dr. Fleischer, if you agree, we can open to questions from our audience.
I'd be happy to do that. If anyone has questions, do step up, ask Dr. Grandi what you would like. There's a lot of directions we can go, but instead of going in a random assortment of directions, we'll just base it on the questions that come in. Is there any questions so far about anything that Dr. Grandi has shared up to now?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. And who's speaking?
This is Dylan.
Great, Dylan, go ahead.
So, the Super Amino 23, would you basically use it in conjunction with another dietary protein to help the protein synthesis?
Of course, what I said before was that is the only one worldwide that you can use even without using in conjunction with any protein. No other protein, no other dietary supplement can nourish a person for a long period. All products manufactured with the soy or casein or whey protein, even in clinical nutrition, the physician and the surgeon, they know that. They can only recommend it to be used over up to 2 weeks, no more than 2 weeks, because otherwise the patient is going to be malnourished, which means those are not protein that you can live your life normally only taking them. With the Super Amino 23, you can do if it's required because of medical reason. Of course, you're not going to suggest or recommend people, listen, you don't have to eat any protein, just take Super Amino 23. What we recommend normally as experts in nutrition, what we recommend is that if you are an athlete, if you take Super Amino 23, you don't have to take any protein shakes or protein bar. You don't need them. What you're going to do is dilute the value of Super Amino 23 with the others, because the others is like if you just put, the popular gasoline with the premium, normal with the premium. Why you're going to do that? If you have premium, you use premium gas. You don't mix with the normal. And those protein supplement, what they're going to do, they overload normally your kidney, especially when you abuse the amount of protein. Happen a lot, is very common among bodybuilders, They think that by taking more protein that they are going to be bigger, and what they do, instead of taking those supplement 20, 30 grams of protein per day, they take up to 100, 120, 150. And when you do the blood test, you can see right away that the level of a toxin called BUN, blood urea nitrogen, is extremely high in those athletes. Why? Because they don't know what they are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Dr. Grandi, I have a question.
Sure.
Chris Jones, and thank you very, very much for your excellent talk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I have a two-part question. Can you briefly describe the design of the study that determined the 99% quality of this product? And number two, was it you compared it to sourced proteins, but was it compared to other amino acid supplements that are on the market?
Yes. What you do normally is not something that we invented, which means we are a research institution called International Nutrition Research Center, and an American research institution. And what we did, we started doing the clinical study called nitrogen balance study. Nitrogen balance study, they are available to everyone that want to perform them. The only problem is that they are extremely expensive. And a nitrogen balance study for a group of 12 people can cost you easily about $5-6 million. Why? Because you have to keep those people for 6 months close in an hospital. And it's very, very difficult to perform. Number one, you cannot even do in the United States because it's on the borderline, because you have to close those people. They cannot leave the hospital, because if they leave the hospital, they can eat or eliminate anything that is necessary in the study. Let me tell you, the nitrogen balance study, they are performed in a way that you have just the same diet for all patients involved in the study. And what you do to calculate, you have to calculate the that is nitrogen, which means the intake of nitrogen from the protein, of course, and also the nitrogen catabolites that are eliminated. And what you do in a very complex way, I'm trying to generalize and simplify. What you do, you say, this amount in, this amount out, how much remain inside the body, the difference. Now, the way that the body eliminates those nitrogen catabolites is through two pathways. One is through the fecal residue, which means you have to collect all the feces of each patient and codify them, and don't mix with all the feces, of course, because the study will be lost, and also all the urine of those patients. Now, because the fact that you cannot lose any amount of feces or urine, you have to close the restroom. And all the urine and feces, they have to be collected by health professionals during the day, which means that those are very complex and expensive study. Several times I just had questions from colleagues and say, how comes that, your institute did those study in nitrogen balance? And I always told them, we don't know. It was open to everybody. The one reason is that they are extremely expensive. Another reason is that they are disgusting to perform, which means it's not something. Now, when you receive relatives or friends that they visit those patients involved in the study, they are treated like in a jail, which means they cannot bring anything, because if they bring some food and these people, they either drink or eat any kind of food, the study is lost. Which means that is very, very, and it's very complex. Dr. Fleischer can send you a copy of one of the nitrogen balance study. It's like really Chinese for the majority of people, which means it's very complex to do it. Now, when you do in the right way, and of course, it's very important to determine those. We did comparative study with soy, with whey, and also with the other amino acid. I cannot disclose the way to do it, but of course there are a cheaper way to just do the calculation. You don't have to do the complete nitrogen balance study if you have a formula. Let me tell you that we measure all the formula that they came during the last 22 years. We had 147 intent of a copy of our Super Amino 23. 147. Everybody is looking for money, 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 and they try to copy us. The highest net nitrogen utilization that they were able to do was 11%. And Super Amino is 99%. Why? Because we got 27 international patents, and of course also here in the United States, But in the patent you don't disclose the whole information. What they did, they tried to copy the formula, and they believed that that was it. And like if we try to duplicate a pizza and we put the cheese and tomato and oil and stuff, but it doesn't come the same pizza. That is what happened, which means that nobody has the technology necessary to do the Super Amino 23. Keep in mind that it's the only product with American amino acid. All the other products, they have Chinese amino acid. And Chinese amino acid are the worst junk possible that you can buy worldwide. And I don't mean to go against the Chinese people because they are wonderful people like us. But it's junk.
Very, very thorough answer. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the good Dr. Grandi?
I had a quick question, if that's all right.
Go ahead, please.
Evan Craker, Top Form. But if you had a muscle imbalance due to an injury that was sustained prior to your, earlier in your life, and you were, let's say you were exercising with some sort of muscle imbalance, would the Super Amino, would it make the imbalance worse because of the power of the protein, or is it going to help that imbalance because of what it does?
Okay, let me tell you, and it's a very interesting question. If you know what to do, no. If you don't know what to do, and you exercise in the wrong way, of course you can keep the imbalance. Otherwise, you can correct at least partially the imbalance. Let me tell you also something that comes with the package. When you have injuries with the Super Amino, the results are so fast that, of course, the period of recovery, by using amino, you have Super Amino 23, you have 3 important points for muscles. And number 1, you increase your muscle strength. You increase your muscle endurance, and you shorten the recovery period after working out, and the most important, you shorten the recovery period after injuries, especially chronic injury. And I really am pleased that you did that question, because we have in some athletes chronic injury that even the coach or the physician or the health professional, they don't know what to do. And the fact, what happened is relatively simple. What happened is that because the injury is a periodic injury, which means I have a problem in the muscle, but I try to work out with that muscle, and it's going to produce more injury. Now, the recovery period is slower than the speed of the injury, and therefore that injury remains chronic. We received during the last 22 years a wonderful amount of good surprise, especially from athletes, that the physician that they were taking care of them, they call us and they said, something strange, we want to talk. Listen, how is possible these athletes, they got this injury, was a chronic injury during the last 3 years, and now we gave them Super Amino 23 just to nourish them, for the muscle, and the injury is gone. And that is also applied in degenerative diseases for the nutritional support. In those degenerative diseases, by using Super Amino, you're not going to treat the degenerative disease. You're not going to cure, unfortunately, but you're going to slow down because the recovery process is faster. which means that is very important. You know, the first things that all athletes realize the first time that they use Super Amino 23, all of them, is the recovery period. Why? Because we have always, after we work out, the day after, we have, you know, a pain, muscle sore, and we don't feel those muscle sore with the same intensity, or we don't feel at all, and we say, how this is possible? I cannot believe. And the second time repeats, and the third time repeats, and you realize that is because the fast recovery.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate
Thank you.
If someone has the television on in the background, please do mute yourself by pressing *6 so that we can have the call quiet for the doctor to answer questions this evening. Thank you very much, everyone, for cooperating. Anyone else with any questions this evening? Fascinating. Dr. Grandi, I have a question, or a question that we have had actually conversations about that may be relevant again to the sports nutrition aspect regarding how we compare these amino acids with BCAAs. It comes up all the time with athletes that I speak to. You know, well, can I take these aminos with the BCAAs, why are these better than the BCAAs, and why are these BCAAs and other amino acids getting so much press versus the Super Amino 23? Could you address that for everyone for just a moment?
Yes. It's very simple, the answer. The answer is that the net nitrogen utilization of branch amino acid is 0, which means branch amino acid by themselves, they cannot ensure any cell synthesis. What they are in the market and what they suggest when they are marketed is that they are going to increase the amount of calories in the muscle, and that they are going to increase the muscle endurance. We are not going now to analyze if that is scientifically true or not. I don't think that is our point this evening. But they cannot ensure not even 1% of net nitrogen utilization. It's 0, which means you want to take because you love branch amino acids is not going to interfere with the Super Amino 23. Neither Super Amino 23 is going to interfere with them, which means that there is no relation. Are oranges and apples.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question here?
Dr. Fleischer, if you allow me, I think that in the audience we have, I heard before, ladies.
Of course.
Okay. Just enlighten me because I'm a little ignorant. In wrestling, do we have women and men or only men?
Both.
Both, okay. Now, suppose that I am a woman, a wrestler, I'm going to say, or any athlete, women, I'm going to say, listen, I don't want to be an Arnold Schwarzenegger, which means I want to be strong, but I don't want to show myself like if I was a macho man. Now, what we have to understand that the muscle work with its density, and I'm talking to all professionals, you know that. It's like concrete with steel inside. Depending on the amount of the steel inside, the concrete is stronger or weaker, which means it's not the volume of the muscle, because as well known, with steroids you can inflate a muscle and have a huge volume of muscle most of the time without even increasing muscle strength, which means that a lady, a woman, can be stronger than a man taking Super Amino 23 and without showing, if she doesn't want that, without showing any huge volume that she doesn't like. Let me give you an example. A pressed leg, you got 120 pounds. Now, by taking MAP, after 4-5 weeks, you can go over 300 pounds. After 12 weeks, you can do the leg press, being a lady and a mother of 2-3 children, with 500 pounds, which means you can be very strong without showing that you are strong, keeping the feminine in the men. Of course, as big you want to be, you can be, but as a woman, you can stop the big and just keep only with the muscle strength. Please.
And Dr. Grandi, that of course is dependent on what exactly, the amount you take, or it has no relevancy to the amount of tablets that you take. It's just the way that the protein works within a woman's frame versus a man's frame, correct?
No, let me tell you, because there is a little different. Depends on the following. Any person, if you are stronger, suppose that in a bench press you start with 100 pounds and right now you are lifting 300 pounds or 250 pounds. If you don't want to increase more in muscle, and when that muscle strength is enough for you, you don't increase the resistance, which means you don't increase the weight more and more and more. Otherwise, what you do to increase more and more and more the resistance, everything that all athletes they do, you try always to lift more weight that you are lifting. And the more you lift, the bigger you're going to be. But the bigger with the Super Amino 23 is nothing compared with the inflating muscle with water retention and sodium retention. When you touch the muscle, you can feel the density of the muscle. It's like a stone. And Dr. Fleischer, you know that because you have just, you saw some patient that they are 75 years old and that you touch them and they seem like 25 years old athletes.
Understood.
Which means the quality of the muscle is going to be a lot more dense than those kind of muscle that they are inflated, which means you stronger.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Any other question from the audience?
Any other questions for Dr. Grandi here today, or we'll wrap up the call? Oh, there we go. We have another question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yes, we hear you.
My question is in concern to nursing mothers and your recommendation for the amount of super aminos in a day, and also the effects on the mother and the child.
Okay. I'm so glad that you asked me so necessary and interesting question. Let me tell you, when we have a patient that they are malnourished, especially in some developing countries, unfortunately, we find, of course, mother and babies. Now, when you have a malnourished mother and malnourished baby, what you do? You don't nourish the newborn. If the mother is breastfeeding, what you do, you nourish with the Super Amino 23 the mother, and we already know that in 7 days, the mother is going to have a perfect, balanced, optimized mother milk. Which means that when you take amino in a normal mom, what you're going to do, you're going to ensure that both mom is going to be well nourished and also the baby if mom is lactating, which means is breastfeeding the baby. Why? Because human milk in a malnourished mom, the amount of protein, of amino acid contained in the mother milk can be reduced by 20, 30, 50, 60%, which means that you breastfeeding the baby, and the baby is not satisfied. You can see right away. After 20 minutes, is crying again. And normally we ask the mom that the baby, after you breastfeeding your baby, is crying or not, or you just sleep a couple of hours. If it's sleep a couple of hours, everything is fine. Otherwise, you know that in less than 7 days, you are going to have a perfect balance in your mother milk, and that your baby is going to be nourished even better. No contraindication.
Thank you so much.
It's recommended. It's not that it's not no contraindication. There is no contraindication, but it's recommended for moms that they are not nourished in an optimal way, you know?
Yes. And also, what would be the recommended dosage for a mother? Would that be the same as anyone else?
Tell me again, sorry?
The
dosage. Okay.
Dosage,
the dosage
yes.
depends. Let me tell you how you measure the dosage with other people. Nobody likes to fill forms, you know? On the phone you cannot tell, fill this form. Nobody likes. There is a very simple question that you can ask any athlete or any normal person that they are not athletes. Tell me how much meat, fish, or poultry do you eat per day? A pound, half a pound, a quarter of a pound, or less than a quarter? Answer me.
Less than a quarter.
Okay. You ask that question to anybody, and you know already how many tablets of super amino they are going to need. You're going to need 20 tablets per day at least. Why? Because you don't consume that amount. You know, in the Olympics, here in the United States, few people they know. In the Olympics, when you are in the Olympics, you have to eat normally. The ration for the day of protein goes meat, fish, poultry, between 2 to 3 pounds per day. Large people, they have to consume 3 pounds. And you know, some people, they cannot afford to eat that huge amount of food. Therefore, when you take, just to give you the equivalent, when you take 30 tablets of MAP, you are having the same body protein synthesis, more or less, that you should have with a couple of pounds of meat, fish, or poultry, without having to digest them. Therefore, in your case, with the 20 tablets, you know that you are going to be well nourished in comparison to right now, which means in optimal level. Let me tell you where is the negative point that nobody can tell you, because you have to be an expert working in malnutrition to know that. If you do any physical activity, our brain understands physical activity as a survival activity, not as a pleasant activity, which means for the primitive human being, when you did the physical activity, was to survive, was not, you didn't go to the gym to have fun. That means that your brain, like other man, understand physical activity as a survival activity. Meanwhile, the baby was inside you, it was priority number 1 for your brain, which means the brain priority was to nourish the fetus. Right now that the baby already was born, the priority for your brain is to nourish your muscle, because it's a survival activity, which means that if you eat 2 small amount, either in quality of or a quantity of dietary protein, your brain is going to use the protein first for your muscle and after that for your milk. You see where is the danger?
Yes, I do.
Which means that you have to be well nourished, or either way you don't have to work out, because otherwise the baby is going to have a milk that is not the best quality. Now, if you take 20 tablets of MAP, no problem, because it's going to be enough for all your muscle and also for the milk for your baby. Okay?
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Excellent question. That was an excellent question. We'll take one last question, and then we'll call it a night. Anyone have any other questions for Dr. Grandi this evening?
I noticed that since I've been using the Super 23 Amino, that the cellulite in my thighs have definitely lessened. And I was telling one of my friends that since I've been taking it, I noticed that I don't have those cellulite pockets that normally comes up in women's thighs. And I just want to know, is that, should I even be increasing the amount of super amino that I take to even lessen that to a greater degree?
Okay, let me tell you something. It's not, unfortunately, so simple, which means it's not your fault. When you have what is called cellulites, most of it, they are just the water retention. It's not the real cellulite. The real cellulite is a disease. Normally, everybody calls cellulite when you have hanging tissue, you know. Okay, the hanging tissue, of course, comes for bad nutrition and excessive water and sodium retention. You need the Super Amino 23, of course, but not only the Super Amino 23. You need also physical activity that is going to make easier just to get rid of what you are calling now cellulite, which means it's going to help you to regenerate the skin in a way that is not going to hang the skin. But if inside the skin you have excessive water retention and sodium, still the weight of that water is going to hang the tissue, which means that you should just pay attention to the different problems, which means you need physical activity, you need a diet that is going to help you to those objective targets that you have, and of course you also need the super amino to be sure that there are enough quality and quantity protein to regenerate those cells.
Well, I want to personally thank you, Dr. Grandi, for coming to the call tonight.
Thank you.
I know that you have a very busy schedule, and I want to thank everyone in the audience for coming to the call tonight to make it what it is. It's your questions that actually make this kind of a call be so beneficial for all of us. So again, thank you, Dr. Grandi.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.